Hi, my name is Dayna, and I love writing, collecting, reading, and sharing zines. A zine is a DIY publication that is typically made using a copy machine. Zines can be cut and paste collaged or laid out on a computer, and they can be about literally any topic. But the one thing that unites them all is accessibility. Zines are about getting your art or words or thoughts and feelings out into the world in a physical medium, not about making money or being a so-called commercial success. Instead, they are intended to be more accessible to make and access than traditional print media and serve as a way of building community. If you're just getting into zines, it can be kind of intimidating knowing where to start and figuring out how to assemble your zine. So I thought that today I would go over the nuts and bolts of zine composition, how to determine your pagination, and how to lay out your zine pages so that when you copy your masters, your zine pages will print out in the correct order. Let's get started. Cue the intro music. We're going to start with the anatomy of a zine. Today, in this video, I'm going to be breaking down zines that have been folded, then bound. If you're looking for a tutorial about making a zine from one folded sheet of paper, then this video isn't going to be much help. But lucky for you, I've already recorded a mini zine tutorial that I would recommend checking out instead. What we'll be discussing today is the layout for a folded and bound zine. These zines can come in many sizes and even many shapes, but the one thing that unites them all is that they are made up of signatures. A signature is a sheet of paper that is folded in half to form 4 zine pages. This zine, the Witchy Zinester's Pocketbook of Spells, is made up of 4 signatures, which means it has 16 pages, not counting the cover. I'm able to print all 4 signatures on one sheet of paper, which makes this a pretty economical zine for me to print, and that means I'm able to print and distribute more copies of it. I've created a handy template for creating your own 16-page folded mini zine. It shows how the signatures are laid out with their corresponding page numbers. I've dropped a link to it down in the description box, and you can print it out and collage directly on top of the template. You'll collage page 1 right here, page 2 here, and so on and so forth. One thing you'll want to keep in mind is to be aware of your printer settings and how your pages will flip when you print duplex or double-sided copies. You always want to flip your pages based on the left and right hand sides of your signature. For instance, for this zine template, you'll want to flip your copies on the short edge of the paper. If you were to flip your copies on the long edge, your copy would print upside down. A good trick to remember is that if your pages are landscape before they are trimmed and bound, then you'll want to flip on the short edge. If your pages are portrait before they are trimmed and bound, then you'll want to flip on the long edge. Note that I said before they are trimmed and bound. A half-size zine will look portrait when it is finished, but before it is folded and stapled, the signatures are in landscape. So, to make a 16-page bound mini zine, you'll want to print off the first page of this template, set your printer to flip on the short edge, and then print off the second page on the back of the same sheet of paper. Now, follow the page numbers to lay out your mini zine, and then make your copies, remembering again to flip on the short edge. Trim down your zine signatures, stack them, fold them, staple them, and voila! You just made a mini zine. But what if you're planning a larger or longer zine? I don't have a template for you for those, but I can share my method for laying out my zines and determining the pagination, a format that I call the up-down method. I'm really not sure if this is how everyone figures out page numbers and the layouts for their zines, but doing this works for me. It helps me visualize the page layout. This method works great for zines you've already collaged, and it also works well if you're in the brainstorming process and trying to outline a zine before diving in. I do a mix of both as part of my creative process. Sometimes I'll get to work drawing or designing zine pages, and I'll deal with the pagination later, when I scan in the final spreads. And other times, I'll start with an outline and stick to that. But either way, I use this method to figure out how my signatures need to be laid out. What I do is write the amount of zine pages that I need to print in 2 equal columns. The first half of the pages I write down the column, and the second half of the pages I write upwards. I feel this is easier to show you rather than explain verbally. So for instance, here I have a 20-page zine that I'm planning. So I'll write numbers 1 through 10 vertically like this, and then across from 10 I'll write 11 and work my way up. 12 will be across from 9, and so on and so forth. You always want to break your columns at the halfway point. Those halfway point pages will be your centerfold. Next, I separate these page numbers into signatures, groups of 4. This helps me see what pages will be printed out together. So page 1 and page 20 are on one side of a signature, and 2 and 19 are on the other side. And since I know that even page numbers typically fall on the left side of a signature, and odd page numbers fall on the right, then I can use my columns to create a template for myself as to what pages go where. Oftentimes, I'll even write R's and L's for right and left down my columns so I can keep it all straight in my brain. Doing the up-down method essentially helps me visualize what those signatures will look like. Since I tend to be a visual thinker, I find that this method makes a lot of sense to me. It also helps me recognize places where I might need to adjust my page count. Here are some examples of how I've put this method to work. For the 2020 quarantine issue of my perzine Pokey, I collaged my spreads without paying any mind to how I would collate the zine. Once it was finished, I drew my up-down method to determine the pagination and visualize my signatures. The zine ended up needing 44 pages or 11 signatures. Then I scanned in all of my collaged zine spreads into the computer, and I saved each one as a separate file. I used Photoshop to lay out the files based on my up-down columns, with 2 signatures per sheet of paper. While filming this video, I actually found the original note pages that I used to write down the up-down method for this zine. So here is a peek at those. For my guide to terrariums, I approached this whole process a little differently. I knew I wanted my zine to be 20 pages long, so I began with 2 columns laid out in the up-down method with 10 rows for each. Then I filled out the column with my ideas for each page of my guidebook. I used these columns as an outline to follow as I wrote the zine. I still designed this zine spread by spread, and then I laid it all out digitally, placing the pages in the order I created during the outline process. Since I used InDesign to lay out this zine, I cropped each spread in half when I placed it into the appropriate page. Even if you don't have access to software like Photoshop or InDesign, you can still use this method to outline your zine. Simply decide on a page count from the get-go, making sure, of course, that that count is divisible by 4, and then use the up-down method to determine what pages will be a part of which signature. Then you're going to create a template for yourself. You'll fold paper and number it to match the columns. You can collage, doodle, write, and draw straight on top of this template to make your masters. I use this method when working on my zine Hagwitch. Instead of designing each spread on a single sheet of paper, I laid out my signatures and worked across the folded pages to design cohesive spreads. This all might still feel super confusing and overwhelming. I get it. It took me years of experimentation in zine making to feel comfortable laying out my zines and to get a grasp on pagination and collation. I still have to make my up-down columns every single time I make a zine to have any chance of laying it out properly. But all that being said, I do have one last trick for you to try that will simplify this process. A zine layout hack my friend Nash came up with that is just genius. If you're able to put the meat of your zine into a PDF format, then you can drop the file into Nash's Zine Arranger and it will collate your zine for you. This is such a great option if your zine is text heavy. You can drop the text of your zine into Google Docs, choose a neat font, export it as a PDF. Next, you'll hop over to Nash's Zine Arranger, choose your size, upload the PDF, and voila! Nash has done all the hard work for you. All that's left for you to do is print it out and assemble. This tool is amazing. Seriously, my friends are so smart and so cool. Everyone say thank you, Nash. They just made all of our zine lives so much easier. And that's it. That is what I have for you today, Zinesters. I hope that this helped demystify the zine making process for you if you're new to the zine scene, or maybe it gave you a new way to approach your craft if you're a veteran zine maker. Either way, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate every view and like and comment so much. So if you can, please like and subscribe so this video has a fighting chance in the algorithmic ecosystem. And most of all, I hope you have a wonderful day and take care. Bye!